So Charlie and I are here to collaborate on talking to you about the Industrial Revolution and the Wesleyan response to it. This is a bad news, good news presentation. I am here to bring the mainline gloom. I am going to talk to you about all of the ways in which the Industrial Revolution inhibited human flourishing and, to some degree, Wesley's response to that. I am not an economist. I am a historian. I am a theologian. So there are going to be some things I'm going to say where you're going to be scratching your head and going, that's a problem. You know, hold your criticism, hear what I'm saying as emotional and theological responses to the Industrial Revolution from people whom you may be dialoguing with, and just keep that in mind. So we're focusing on Wesley because he's important, and one of the reasons he's important is because he lived and wrote and ministered at a time of tremendous economic and social dislocation that was related to the Industrial Revolution. Why was there a dislocation? Well, there was a huge change as industrialization and mechanization happened in the kind of jobs that were done and where people did them. We think of the Industrial Revolution, maybe at least for me, the first thing that comes to mind is the Model T, the factories. Obviously, Wesley's not dealing with building cars, but the forces are in place that are eventually going to give us the factories that build the Model T. Automated for repetitive things where you produce part of an artifact. This is the kind of work is changing, and where it's happening is moving. People have been moving to cities from time immemorial. Jennifer Powell McNutt told us that last night. But in the Industrial Revolution, many people, and I'm thinking of England particularly, moved from rural agricultural-based places to towns, to cities, to factories. There's a greater division of gender roles. You have a farm, everyone on the farm is out, and they may be doing different things, but they're all on their own farm working as a family. Now you have factories, you have offices. No man went to the office in the 17th century. Maybe he went to the coffee shop, but not to the office. There's this huge division of where work is performed by gender. There is sometimes the hiring of children and young women to work in factories. Child labor becomes more of an issue. Did children labor on the farm? Yes. Did they labor for 10 hours a day doing repetitive work? Probably not so much. The church tried to respond to this, but the Church of England parish system was not well set up to do that. Church of England parishes, it was difficult to establish a new one. They were in rural areas, so people might leave that area where there might be a flourishing church that was contributing to and helping the needs of the people, and they go to the city and there's no Anglican church for them to attend. There's no place for them to root themselves in the Christian community. And Wesley really walked into this opportunity and began exploiting it. And Charlie's going to talk a lot about what happened when the Wesleyan movement ministered to people who were not being served by the parish system. What you need to hear is I name off some of these bad news things about the Industrial Revolution. When these critiques are put forth, this tremendous social dislocation, when people hear the word capitalism, I used the C word, when people hear the word capitalism, that's what they think of. Capitalism is exactly equal to dislocation. And that if you're dialoguing with people that you don't agree with on a lot of the things we talk about here, that's what's in the back of their head. Capitalism is always dislocating. Capitalism is always destructive. And right now there's a lot of dislocation. We're moving to a knowledge-based economy. We've all had COVID-related things. The Great Resignation, that's capitalism because it's dislocating. And I think that's going to be a key in your head to a lot of these objections. So some of the things that happened in the Industrial Revolution that were not so good, and Wesley was keyed into responding to a lot of these. Cities are unprepared to deal with the people that are coming there, happened in the High Middle Ages, happened in the Industrial Revolution, increased poverty, increased squalor, increased alcoholism, which I bring up because it was a huge concern of Wesley's. One of the things that Wesley commented on most was the availability of cheap gin, what it was doing to society, and he saw this as a structural problem, not just an individual problem. He wrote frequently against the liquor trade. He also tried to provide health care for people who did not have access to it. He wrote Primitive Physic, which said, things like rub carrots on your head and be electrified. And, but this was so that people could take their health care into their own hands and access this for themselves. He set up a medical dispensary. He was very interested in addressing this overcrowding and overpopulation in towns and cities. Another criticism that's been leveled is that the Industrial Revolution oppressed women. How, people say, is because, well, in the home-based production, you're all sort of doing it together. Maybe you have different roles in the home. Now you send men to factories, you keep upper class and middle class Victorian women at home where they are to be decorative and embroider and play the piano and all that good stuff. Lower class women, how do they support themselves? Many of them turn to prostitution. Wesley was very much concerned about structurally what was happening here. He didn't really zero in on women, but he did affirm the imago Dei in women, and one of the most explicit ways he did that was by saying women are qualified to preach the gospel. They can exhort. Eventually, he said they could be licensed preachers in the Wesleyan movement. He said women are, God bearers, and they can bear the gospel to others. A couple other things, and these are ones Wesley didn't address so much, but ones that are on my mind. I live in Berea, Kentucky, which is a place that is devoted to recovering traditional handicrafts, traditional crops, agriculture, accents, and all of that, the people there say, was taken away from us by the Industrial Revolution. You mechanize, you standardize, and you lose your heirloom tomatoes. And I know people in Berea, Kentucky, who really want us all to be back on our farms, growing our own food, bartering. This is a real thing that they are leveling against the Industrial Revolution. Also, there was negative environmental impact in terms of the growth of cities, the growth of factories, questions about how we regulate things. Do we regulate things when factories and the like are interacting with the environment? And the place Wesley is going to zero in on this the most is the liquor trade. And he writes about how the liquor trade not only destroys lives, but it destroys the environment. And there are some responses in him to respond to that. Last two critiques I'm going to bring up, these are the ones where you're going to scratch your heads and go, why do people think this is a problem? There are people who criticize the Industrial Revolution because it was the source of the Protestant work ethic. And the Protestant work ethic for them is bad news because they say it led to workaholism, it led to a lack of a good rhythm of home and work life. It separated spheres that ought not to be separated. And sometimes people take this right to the feet of Wesley, because Wesley wrote The Use of Money. Well, he preached the use of money, his sermon, and he said, earn all you can, save all you can, give all you can. And right in the sermon, Wesley called out, you're going to want to stop with the first two, don't do that. But people did, and they still do. And one of the places when people talk about the Protestant work ethic is they go back to that sermon and they're like, look, workaholism, bad. So that's going to be a criticism that's very, very salient about the Industrial Revolution. Final thing, you're really going to scratch your head on this one, is that nobody revolted in the Industrial Revolution, at least not in England. Some people are upset that what Wesley did so improved the life of many people in Britain that there was no violent revolution. Because there is an idea, and we can sort of talk about in the question period where this comes from, that, remember, capitalism equals dislocation. The only way to get rid of all the problems that I've been bringing up, some of which are very real problems that are still with us, is to tear the whole thing down and start over. And because of what Wesley did and the human flourishing he contributed to, that didn't happen in England, and in other places where it happened. In France, it didn't end up actually doing a whole lot. But for people who think that only a violent overthrow of the status quo is going to fix what's wrong, what Wesley did is extraordinarily problematic. So now that I've delivered the bad news, we're going to call Charlie to the stage, and he's going to talk about some of the ways the Industrial Revolution contributed to human flourishing and Wesley's involvement in that.